blanket you in Wi-Fi and profit off the radiation. Congregation collecting the people for that Satan. I keeps it blazing, cause I can read between the lines. I ain't blind, we unwind what they're really saying. Genetically modify what you're tasting. Don't need that cottage promise, so now you live up in your mom's basement. Redesign time so your mind is always wasted. Program to crave the basics. Keep the beta in stasis. Pay the state, kid. You're in debt for being born. Messengers are more than just the price for being warned. Don't be alarmed. Disconnect from their machinations. Stop subscribing to the folly of all nations. Bone breaking ain't the answer, cause they seek the ownership of souls. Spread the seeds and watch them grow. Break the chains of control. Break the chains of control.
Sweet eternal balance of all that is good, true, and beautiful, friends. Oh, Rogue Ways is honored because tonight we start season 5 in the best way possible with one person who has put together literally every fundamental principle I've come to love, every lifelong fascination I've ever had, every spiritual axiom I've come to hold dear, and every health-related truth I found to transform our bodies, and has put it all in one place, and many I don't have and didn't know. You've elucidated me as well. All in one place. And if someone wanted to know what made up the core of me and as Rogue Ways as a show, like the soul of Rogue Ways, then Thrive and Thrive 2 are the place to go to understand it all. And Foster Gamble is the man behind Thrive 1 and Thrive 2. And we are so lucky, so grateful, and truly honored to be here with you tonight. Mr. Foster Gamble, 10 million welcomes to Rogue Ways. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. It's really nice to be with you. Thank you.
Thank you. And we had a little bit of difficulty connecting tonight. And, I don't know about you, but I was like visualizing, I was praying, I was like doing forgiveness practice. I was like, this is going to happen. And it did. And we're so good. We're so lucky.
Indeed.
Well, before we get started, I just want to let everyone know also, anyone out there who's watching this or listening to this on the podcast and they're like, I love Thrive and I love Foster Gamble. Well, the 3 days of brightness retreat that I'm putting together at the end of this month for the solstice is it's like the Thrive package put into application. We have master teachers and practitioners that are going to be a part of it. And I just want to put that out there because it relates so perfectly with everything that you are all about, Foster. And I also start the show with a pointless question of the episode. And I was going to ask you if you want to share with us something that people might not know about you, or that they might find surprising about you, or anything like that you want to share with people. It's like one of those icebreaker questions you get in like classrooms.
Yeah.
Tell us something that we wouldn't know or that we wouldn't assume.
Well, I have a cat that I dearly love, who's kind of my spiritual companion after Kimberly. And I also enjoy geometry to the extent that as I walk through the house, I'm continually adjusting the geometries. And I don't feel like I'm majorly OCD. I just find that it gives me a sense of clarity if I'm not being distracted by having the vectors out of equilibrium in my environment.
Wow, that is so fun. It's like, they say you have to clean your house and organize your house sort of before you start a project, because all that distraction goes away and you have this organizational sort of mindset. And it's like you're doing that on the mass level, like for your whole house, the organization of your house, not just putting things away.
Yeah, unfortunately, Kimberly is the same way. So,
yeah.
So it would probably drive someone else crazy.
That is a good thing. Yeah, it also almost feels like when you're describing it, it's like a feng shui, but it's like the natural feng shui that you sort of find as you're moving through it.
Yeah.
That's excellent. Well, in case people aren't that familiar with you, or they haven't seen Thrive 1 or 2, or they just aren't really sure, I was hoping that you would give us sort of the rundown, because I know that you come from a family that people might recognize. And I also know that you maybe, started life thinking you were headed sort of one way and you ended up a bit of a different path. So do you want to give us sort of the background?
Sure. Well, I was born into a family of actually two absolutely wonderful parents. I had no idea how fantastic they were. I knew I loved them and had fun with them, but I didn't know how unusual that was till I was probably in my late teens. And then I realized why all the other kids came over to our house to play. And my father happened to be a member of the Gamble family, descended from James Gamble, the founder of Procter & Gamble. So that gave us a certain amount of privilege, which I came to understand more and more throughout my life. And really the biggest gift of that, and I will forever be grateful to my great-great-grandfather, who was a really visionary business guy who was known for his integrity and taking care of his employees and starting stock option plans and so forth. The fact that he was so successful in that ended up giving me time in my life that most people don't have. And I realized when I graduated from college that it wouldn't do any good for me to go out and get some job that I was going to go around and complain about. But it was kind of an existential time to realize, okay, so we're on a planet with a lot of potential. We're hurting in a lot of big ways. This was like, nuclear holocaust risk and environmental destruction and so forth. So given my situation, I better make my life count. And it was a challenge, but it was a really blessed challenge that I took super seriously. And when I was in college, I had a bunch of friends who were brilliant electronics engineers. And we would sit around and just talking about the future. And they said, listen, Foster, it won't be too long before we will have a global simultaneous information delivery system. So the whole world can talk to each other all at the same time. And, this was in 1968, 69. It was like, that was quite a dream. But I knew these guys were serious and that they would get it done along with a lot of other people. So I said, I have no idea how that gets accomplished. But what I will commit to is finding out how this world works, find out what's in the way of our thriving, so that ideally by the time we have that information delivery system, I've got some content that is worthy of that technology.
Wow.
And that's exactly what happened. I thought it would take me maybe 5, maybe even 10 years, being conservative, to figure out what was really going on and what we could do about it. It took me 42 years before I was finally really ready to create Thrive. And I think part of the reason it took so long was if I had tried to make that film without having met Kimberly, probably no one would have ever heard of it, because she's my soulmate. She's the most brilliant person I know. And she's a dynamite, experienced feature documentary filmmaker. So she actually could manifest this thing that I had been envisioning and researching for a long time. So we had actually just met and decided to do the film together. And then really we fell in love making the film. Most people don't know that. They assume we'd been together for a long time. And it was just a partnership made in heaven. And we would joke as we were making that film, we don't know whether anyone is going to be ready for the information that we're putting out. So we used to joke that either we end up burying a CD in some kind of time capsule that gets opened up later on when people, really want this information, or we would get NASA to send it out in some sort of radio transmission, and maybe it would be useful on another planet that was about to blow themselves up or something like that. But the great news was that the film came out and we never had any advertising budget. It went completely viral.
Yeah.
And now has over 90 million views. It's still being seen by over 1 million people a month. And to me, the main thing about that was just tremendous confirmation that humanity can handle the truth,
yes.
that it wants the truth about what's going on, especially so that we can create solutions which are commensurate to the problem.
Oh, I love so much that this project, Thrive 1 and Thrive 2, are very solution-oriented, and that a lot of people that, we kind of generalize it as like the love and light crew, the love and light people, which I think I'm very love and light, but yeah. A lot of the people who kind of fall under that umbrella can tend to just not look at the darkness at all, which is not, I think, effective. And then if they do, they often get stuck in this place where there's no solution. So then we become hopeless and we fall into the pit. And neither of those things is helpful. And you excellently navigate that, where you and Kimberly have brought together all literally everything. I don't know if people out there haven't seen Thrive 1 and 2. It is everything. Everything you ever needed to know, I think. And how dark and horrible the problem is, how daunting, and how ultimate if we don't solve these things, the ultimate price is going to be paid, and that's, our entire planet, our civilization and humanity, and all these solutions. And it's just really beautiful to see that all in one place, because it's very rare. And so you're right.
That's one of the reasons why I was excited to come on your show, because you're one of the people out there who's not afraid to go anywhere in the conversation.
Thank you.
And you go there with facts, you go there with evidence and common sense. And so you can go, into the astral plane, and you can go down, into the dark side of the global domination agenda. And frankly, that's what we need right now, is people who have the personal centeredness, an expanded enough identity that you've got intellectual room and emotional capacity for handling what's actually being done to us right now. Because if you're in denial about that, you're just going to get in the way of people who are actually trying to solve it. Because we are literally, I don't need to tell you this, but maybe some of the people listening, we are in a situation worse than Germany in the 40s. Yeah. And a cousin of mine recently that I was talking with, and really has no idea of all this kind of stuff and really doesn't want to know. She happened to say to me, I can't imagine what people in Germany were thinking in the 40s when Hitler's thing was starting to happen. Why didn't they catch on sooner? And I just looked at her and I said, what they were feeling, what they were thinking was exactly what you're feeling and thinking right now, because this is even worse. And you don't even know that it's going on, nor want to engage in the conversation. And that's exactly the way it's been orchestrated.
Yes. Well said. And it is exactly that, worse, because now the technology and the means, like you were saying, we back in the 60s, and you're looking ahead to this thing that's going to let us all talk at the same time. This is crazy. Now we have that and more, and it's being used against us. And the nice thing is, and I don't know why, and maybe it's that source field that's everywhere all at once. I don't know how we've gotten to go this long while still using it pretty freely. We're seeing some intense censorship. We're seeing some intense manipulation of the worldview through these technologies. But, the specter of that level of domination is pretty terrifying. Like I said, I really feel like that is the sort of it's like the final game here, Yeah.
Well, it's an interesting topic right now, because I've looked into this pretty deeply, and I've got a bunch of really high-level hacker friends who keep me informed. And frankly, I think it's the hackers who've kept it open. Yay. Because as they start, there were more than 80 bills before the U.S. Congress basically trying to take over the internet, and none of them passed. But more importantly, as they started, the powers that want to control us, as they've tried to consolidate power over the internet or shut anything down, the hackers simply give them a demonstration, and all of a sudden, NASA goes down, the Federal Reserve goes down, and they've made it very clear: you mess with us, we're going to bring you down. And secondly, I think that it's all so interdependent now on the international internet that they can't afford to actually bring it down, because all the major corporations, the banks, the intelligence agencies, they're all using it. But given the global nature of this lockdown, of the medical tyranny and all that kind of stuff, I've been really wondering, okay, are they going to try to at least temporarily shut down the internet so people like you and I can't be in touch with each other? Right. And sure enough, Dr. Strangelove, Klaus Schwab of the World Economic Forum came out with one of their predictive programming announcements just about a week ago, saying that, yes, we're dealing with the pandemic, but what we need to prepare for next is potential collapse of the internet. So it's not like he hasn't thought about it.
Yeah. Yeah, and you're exactly right that it is that predictive programming and that signaling, which, like, who knows? I'd like to hear your idea of why they seem to need to do that and tell us all what they're going to be doing. But that is what they're predicting now, is this cyber terrorism. And so that's a pretty frightening specter as well, you know, and we combine it with what's going on right now already. And what will people do if they don't have access? Because I feel like right now, some of the stopgaps that have sort of like seem to at least throw some monkey wrenches in their spokes have come from people knowing enough just in time to be like, wait a second, I want to question this for a moment, you know, and if we don't have that, then what happens?
Well, people who are just waking up to this tend to not be aware that they have been after the things that they've gotten, that the controllers have gotten over the last 11 months is stuff they've been drooling about for decades, you know, going for the cashless society, collapsing the US economy, destroying small businesses, you know, censoring dissidents, instigating civil unrest and banning freedom demonstrations, enforcing global vaccinations and chipping, you know, imposing Agenda 21. And, you know, obviously I could go on and on. Your audience probably knows a lot of this stuff. They were having a frustrating time, as we cover in Thrive 2. You know, we've actually made progress with banning GMOs and with exposing these pedophilia rings and keeping RFID chips out of our body and keeping using not only cash, but cryptocurrencies and so forth. So I think they were getting desperate. And the agenda, the global banking agenda, is so broke. I mean, it's a strange term to have the people who actually can print money, and they're some of the wealthiest people on the planet, to think of them as broke. But their banks are hundreds of trillions of dollars in derivatives debt. So if there's any what they call mark to market, where anything gets realistic at all, they're all out of business. And that's one of the big things that people don't recognize now also, is that while they've got us fighting over keeping our businesses open and who should be wearing a mask and, you know, when is this vaccine going to save us and so forth, while they got us fighting with each other over that stuff, they just did $7.3 trillion in bailouts of the bankers. And where does that money come from? Well, it comes from our children and it comes from our grandchildren. This is literally enslaving future generations to try to bail out the banks under the guise of this scam pandemic.
Yeah. Oh, it's awful. Someone was saying on some clip I saw recently, you know, he's a restaurant owner and he came out and talked to the news. The news didn't even go there to interview him. He just saw the news and went out and was like, hey, look. And he was like, they just gave, like you said, these trillions of dollars. They could have given every single small business that's suffering right now something like $20,000, $30,000 each. Just to, you know, if they really cared about us helping us get through this pandemic, then they would have done that instead. Why are the richest people getting bailed out when the lowest amongst us is losing our businesses? It's our whole livelihood. And everyone should recognize by now that we are interdependent. If those things all fall, what else falls with it? You know, we are also less likely to succeed in whatever endeavor if everyone around us is failing.
Yeah. One of the things that I'm most excited about, I'd be interested in your view of this, because I think you kind of bridge a lot of worlds as we do, is that the consciousness community, the spiritual and new age community, is starting to wake up fast to this. And I know that there's a lot of folks, I think mostly infiltrators in that movement, who are fighting against it, calling it conspirituality and, you know, don't pay any attention to the man behind the curtain type of thing, in order to try to keep people in meditation rather than taking their meditation state into effective action. But it's happening. And, you know, even in these articles that are looking to debunk conspiracy theory, they're having to acknowledge that this awakening is just flaming through all these communities, and it's unstoppable despite their kind of BS that they're putting out, trying to stop conspiracy theory the same way the CIA did in 1967 when they invented the term to try to stop people from questioning the Warren Commission around Kennedy.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I definitely see that exact same thing. And there, it's like I was saying earlier, the spiritual community kind of has that like lack, I feel like, where they don't want to look at it. And you're probably exactly right that there are people who are sent in as agents to distract from it and to, boohoo it and talk crap about it and make it seem like it's crazy. And, I've seen that in spiritual communities that I interact with as well. And I've seen that it's not even really okay to question or talk about it openly because it might bother some people and you're not allowed to bother people for some reason. And I'm like, well, agitation is one of the ways in which like cells, use and basically healthy things used to warn each other about things. Yeah. Like this is not a negative thing, but there's that whole idea, like if you look at it, you give it power, or if you think about it, you like make it stronger and you just have to like wish it away. And I'm like, that doesn't work when there's, a killer coming with a knife at your back. You have to actually turn around and kung fu them.
Well, that's a really good analogy. And I spent 15 years training and teaching in the nonviolent martial art of Aikido. Mm-hmm. And the very first thing that my teachers taught me and that I taught my own students was, if you're going to protect yourself and your loved ones, the prime directive is situational awareness, to have an accurate assessment of what's going on in your reality. Because if you don't, you're going to be taken out. And so it's the same thing on a species-wide level now. If we're going to protect ourselves as a species, and a lot of energy has gone into evolution of developing human beings on this incredibly gorgeous, abundant planet, and we literally could be taken out or enslaved by just not wanting to look at the truth. And I'll tell you, after Thrive 1 came out, and we started taking a lot of flack from the left, particularly, and from the consciousness movement of, oh, this is us and them. And like you say, if you look at the dark side, it's going to suck you in and all that kind of stuff. But at the same time, we were getting emails and phone calls and packages sent from spiritual teachers, including interdimensional entities that are channeled through various folks, and just repeatedly saying, thank goodness for your guys using the media and bringing this knowledge, and not only of the toroidal energy field as the fundamental pattern of sustainability, but of this dark agenda, which is in the way of humanity thriving. And they were saying that they try to teach their students, if you're going to truly expand your consciousness, it matters what you're becoming conscious of. Yeah. It's not just a matter of, oh, I saw a 2,000 petaled lotus in my meditation. Yeah. It's like, okay, when you came back, did you do anything about the lives that are being destroyed around you, about the children who are being abused and tortured around the world? If you're ignoring that, good luck with your spiritual development. So fortunately, I think that, like you said, with the internet, and now with just people maturing and finally, it's one of the silver linings of this whole, what I call covert 19, is that it's taking its tentacles into so many hundreds of millions or billions of lives in a really negative way that I've never seen people waking up so fast and going, no, wait a minute. Okay, by what authority did someone just destroy the business that I put 20 years and all my savings into? And that's happening by the hundreds of thousands of businesses just in the US. But I talk to people, in Asia and in Europe and South America. It's exactly the same there. So I think we're at a crossroads unprecedented in human history, because at the same time that the domination agenda is really global for the first time, the awakening momentum is also global for the first time.
I love that. And I have this like image in my head that it's hard to explain, but it's like the darkness like grows, and like you said, it has all its tentacles in, and the light's just kind of sitting there, and like you're talking about, it's like got its head in the sand maybe, or it's like looking at a million petaled lotus or whatever, and like kind of ignoring it. But then at the moment when the light does notice the darkness, if it can like just look at it and have like a strong, just like, oh no, we're not doing that. Like, like a full on intention of that I feel like that whole structure can like just be like poof, transformed.
Well, and it's the time when the practices of, billions of people across the planet who have been developing their spiritual bodies, who've really been deepening their center and learning about processing emotion and clearing their mind and tapping their inner guidance. all of that now is tremendously valuable. I mean, that's really at the core of what we need. It's just that we need that. And,
yes,
you know, when I taught Aikido classes, we would spend the first 10 or 15 minutes in meditation. And the challenge was then to stand up and have people practice attacking you. And you keep that state while you're dealing nonviolently, ideally, but effectively with all of the problems that are being sent your way. And that's our challenge as a species right now. So it's like, you know, I think this is what a lot of us came for this lifetime. We're finding each other really fast. And, you know, what an incredibly exciting time to be alive.
yes. And I think that beauty, too, of finding each other, like you're saying, is it's like every time we find each other and we connect, we like grow a little bit brighter. And then more other people are like, oh, wait, what's that light over there? And then they connect to it, you know, and it's, I can't think of the word in math, but it's exponential, I think.
Yeah, it's asymptotic. It's going rapidly toward the vertical line.
Yes, and Aikido is like the perfect metaphor for how we should, you know, this is how we should apply to life. Like you were saying, take that meditative state and bring it into action. But what a challenge, you know, when you can't even like sometimes get people to even consider meditating, you know, or there's so many people who are like, I can't meditate. I'm like, well, everybody can't meditate until they practice it. You know, you have to practice it and then you can do anything really. But yeah, have you had luck in bringing those types of spiritual concepts to people who don't really feel like that's for them?
I feel like we're having increasing success going both ways, because Kimberly and I are still invited to, well, when conferences were happening, but it's happening virtually now. We're still invited to left-wing conferences, right-wing conferences, libertarian, voluntarist, apolitical, spiritual, UFO. Awesome. We're invited everywhere, which I take as a tremendous compliment, an acknowledgement that we're not sold out to any particular camp. We're committed to solutions which align with the natural dynamics of the unified field. And I think human beings can recognize that. I mean, there are people perpetrating the agenda. They recognize that also. Yeah. And you know, we've heard leaks from the inside about, oh my God, what are we going to do with the gambles? Because they've tried attacking our reputation, and you know, there aren't skeletons in the closet that are going to destroy our credibility and that type of stuff. And so, you know, when Thrive 1 came out, we immediately got audited within 2 months, where the IRS was auditing us. And I said to people, well, you watch, you know, when Thrive 2 comes out. The film had not even come out. Within weeks of the trailer coming out, we were contacted by the IRS and said, well, you've come up in a random selection to help us create the audit of the future. And my accountant says, you know, in 40 years in his business, he's never seen such a thorough thing. And, you know, I'm convinced this is not random at all. Yeah. Fortunately, Kimberly handles the accounting and bookkeeping end of our businesses, and it's all impeccable. So they're not going to find anything there either. It's just a pain in the ass. And I said, well, you know, how long is this going to go on? Because we've got to give them all these bank statements and all this I figured, you know, maybe even a month. They said, well, it'll probably be at least 4 or 5 months. Well, I said, well, so since I'm paying you to do this job, will we at least get a tax deduction for all of our time with our accountants and bookkeepers? Oh no, that's not the way it works. It's so ridiculous. I mean, if it weren't so tragic, it would be very funny.
Yeah. And sometimes you have to laugh anyway because you can't take it anymore.
Right.
Is that, I mean, that's a good amount of suppression, but it's also, you've been able to get it out. And like you said, the first one went viral. And, you know, I do think this speaks to that spiritual aspect of things that also wants this to be out and wants to connect it to people who want to get it and this. Yes. But what else have you maybe faced besides the IRS? Has there been other?
Well, when Thrive 1 came out, we had a number of debunking sites that either a corporation or the government would put up, and they were all baloney. You know, even our own audience would go on those sites and just start asking them the questions like, okay, well, who are you really? If you're debunking them, on what basis are you doing that? What's your expertise? What's your real name? and basically accusing them of just being professional debunkers.
Yeah.
And within a year, actually a year to the day, the last one went away, declaring victory over Thrive, saying the movement has entirely failed. Well, that was when we were probably at 10 million views. And we went on to have over 1,100 solutions groups in more than 90 countries around the world. But that strategy collapsed. I'm sure they'll probably try it again. But so far, fortunately, we haven't had any physical problems at all. We haven't had any death threats. We had a couple of situations where stalkers who were stalking us on the internet said they were going to come to events, and we have a security team that is available to us for incidents like that. And when we go to visit doctors who have cures for cancer or inventors who have free energy devices and so forth, we always take a security team with us. And they say if they're getting their job done, nobody will ever know who they are, and we'll never have a problem. And so far, that's the way it's been.
That's excellent. And how cool that you've been able to find one that you can trust, or people that you can trust to do that, because I think that would be one of the problems, for me at least, is you can't just go out and hire someone, because you wonder then, well, who's maybe also paying them or who's maybe also interested in them. So it's awesome that you've been able to find that. And I really appreciate that too, because I love the story. I don't want to ruin it for anyone who hasn't seen Thrive 2. I don't want to spoil anything. But when you went to visit the free energy creator guy, that was such a beautiful story and moment, and the emotion that he had in his eyes, like the gratitude that he had, because he had been living in fear as well, knowing that, like, you had this part in Thrive where you just list all of these inventors over time who have just been suppressed, and the list keeps going and going and going, and there's so many I've not even heard of. And he understood that danger as well, that it's not just that you might not ever get heard of or you might not get it out, it's that they kill people, they take people out, and they burn down all of their warehouses or whatever, their labs, and it's a real danger. So I'm glad you've been able to stay safe.
Yeah, and that I don't think this will spoil anything for people who haven't seen Thrive 2. Thrive 2 is so deep in content that people usually watch it in sections, and then they go back and watch it 2, 3, 4 times.
You can do that.
So I think this will be more like a trailer for people.
True.
That one of the punchlines is, I spent 20 years looking for working free energy devices, and I found at least 3 of them, probably 4. And so it was a big thrill to have the inventors agree to allow us to help bring it out and to allow us to film it. So being in the presence of this type of device, this young inventor in Africa has got a device that makes no noise, is plugged into nothing, no pollution, and it just pumps out a 0.5 megawatt. That's 500 kilowatts of energy continually for months, for years. And that's enough to run about 300 homes in Africa. Wow. So it's clearly a complete game changer.
Yeah.
And when he first announced it to the world, this was before I met him, people didn't take him seriously. And nobody would give him a patent on it, because they have a policy, particularly in the US, of not patenting so-called perpetual motion machines. There is no perpetual motion machine, because every machine is material and breaks down, but there is a perpetual source of energy that you can tap, and he is. And so somebody came out to his lab from a TV station in Zimbabwe and did a clip about, he did some demonstrations. And that's when the government realized, oh, okay, maybe this guy is for real. So they visited him and said, congratulations on this. We need to take this technology and use it for our military. And he said, no, I'll share it with you, because Zimbabwe is very short on energy. They're very short on wealth, well, at least on money. But he said, this technology was God's gift through me for all God's children, because he literally channeled this in prayer. Wow. He had no knowledge of electronics.
Wow. I didn't catch that part. I must have.
Yeah, but he had been, we didn't go into this in the film itself. But since he was a child, he's just naturally spent hours a day in prayer.
Wow.
And when he was 14, the prayers started being answered, and he started being taught electronics concepts.
Wow.
And this went on for a while. And then all of a sudden, after one of these downloads, he realizes, oh, I think I understand electronics now. At which point, his visions changed to specific schematics. And he would be shown these schematics. He would come out of his prayer and he would draw them and give them to a friend who could build circuit boards, and they worked. So he went on to build a private radio transmitter in his backyard, and he started a radio station as a teenager.
Oh, wow.
Of course, within a few days, the government shows up and says, "No, you're not allowed to do that." He says, "Okay, well, what else could I do with my spiritual guidance about radio frequencies?" And he had another vision in one of his sessions where he was in a rural medical clinic in Africa, and people were dying for lack of refrigeration of their medicines. So when he came back out of that vision, he goes, "Okay, that's something I could do. We should have energy devices which work anywhere, anytime." So that took him a couple of years, but he did it.
Wow.
And so now he's bringing this and numerous other inventions out to the world. And it's such a reminder that we're living in a field of cosmic consciousness. Yeah. And you can tap that field with purity of intent and with the perseverance to bring those messages through. But then on a scientific level, that we're literally living in a boundless environment of abundant energy. Mm-hmm. And that can be tapped as long as we don't violate the field in the process. So it's the proof of the spiritual paradigm of oneness and of infinite abundance.
Wow. It's so profound. I feel like you were saying we could watch the movie this many times. We could listen to that section of the show however many times and keep going deeper and deeper. This man who was doing this channeling and prayer, I want to point out that many inventors over time have said similarly, like Nikola Tesla also said the same thing, and we just see this again and again. And so I love that is having attention drawn to it, and that also it doesn't sound like he's part of any certain specific tradition or religion or whatever. I just always like to emphasize to people that anybody can do this, and these things can be, there's this quote that I'm gonna butcher, but it's something like all of the mystery of the cosmos can be revealed to someone in a split second. You don't have to, you can follow a certain tradition, there's nothing wrong with that, right? But if you're one of these people, like many people who just don't really find that very appealing, you can also just go within yourself and be still and quiet and access anything.
Yeah, exactly. Anyone. And his particular cultural milieu has been in Harare, Zimbabwe. His community has been part of an evangelical Christian church. Yeah. But he's a good example of someone who has basically eliminated the middleman. Yeah. Yeah. And he just talks directly to the divine, and then listens really well, and he's committed to bringing the gifts that he's given through. And I was starting to say before that when he refused the government, when he refused to give it to them exclusively, they threw him in jail and tortured him basically for 52 days.
Wow.
And then they released, and he said, "Kill me if you need to, but I'm not going to give you exclusive knowledge of this. This was not what the gift was for." So they let him out, I think just hoping he would develop it more, and then they would take it. And then both he and his partner were poisoned, and his partner died. And he is still trying to recover from that. When I heard about him, and it took me 2 months to find him and to contact him, and he invited me to come to Zimbabwe, which I did immediately. And when I was there, he was still recovering from this. But one of the reasons why he decided he wanted to work with me was that I said, "Max, my advice would be go open source with this, because it's just so dangerous if you don't." And he said to me, he said, "Well, obviously I've been shown that this is a very dangerous thing. So that's my strategy too." So that's the basis on which we work together. And then when COVID shut everything down, we couldn't get the clients and the investors, and he couldn't get parts from China and so forth. The whole thing just kind of stopped and basically ran out of money. And but he had a lot of people still interested. He sold some of these devices around Africa, and so he said, Foster, I just need to start selling these devices in order to keep myself going. So we're doing what we can to protect him. The path is not what I would have recommended to him, but so far, I mean, just in the past, since the weekend, I've gotten 5 emails or calls from people from around the world who either want to purchase or invest in what he's doing. And they're not even supposed to be contacting me. They're contacting him by the hundreds and thousands right now.
Wow.
So I think that the time has come, because as I say, there's 2 other technologies which I think will be coming out probably within the next year to 2 that are already completed and performing at the same kind of remarkable level. So I think we're there.
Wow. Yeah, just in case people don't understand, if you go watch, Thrive 2, you'll see, but this machine produces, like you showed, it doesn't just, it has the batteries and they have a certain level, right? And after however long it's been making this huge amount of energy, it should have been completely depleted. But instead of being completely depleted, it had more than it originally had, right?
Yeah, that's what this particular radio frequency device does, is it creates a condition that around the batteries in such a way that the batteries themselves are drawing energy from the field instead of getting depleted. So we did this test where the big device has 18 12-volt batteries in it. And when we finished the test, it was running a welding machine, which takes a tremendous amount of power. It was running it for hours, so that, as you say, it should have been empty. When we tested them, all the batteries were completely full. So that's what it does. It literally is an over Unity device.
Wow. Unity device. I just love that name in itself and everything that it implies. And I like that you brought up that, we can use this energy if we do it in the right way, and that it doesn't just imply, it shows that there's this spiritual sort of principle to things. And this is what we've been missing in everything, in all of materialism, and the whole history of that, and our whole current paradigm is that element of spirit and spirituality. And it's just really it's so sad, because people have been taught to have derision for spirituality and, to think that it's insane or crazy or something, just like, oh, it belongs back in antiquity. You're a modern person. Like, you should get with a program. And it's like, this is our biggest failing, I think. And if we can bring that back to people's minds, and here's one way that you can kind of show it. And I don't know. I need
there's
to find
not a
ways.
single successful inventor that we have worked with over the last 9 years who does not ultimately acknowledge to us a spiritual guidance that has been a part of their process.
Wow.
Because the intellect is very powerful. It's an important tool.
Yes.
But without intuition, it is so limited. So in the same way that this German guy Kekulé, who's the chemist that we cite in Thrive 2, had a vision of this snake eating its tail in a dream, and woke up the next morning and realized, oh, that's the shape of the benzene molecule that I've been trying to figure out for years.
Yeah.
And, John Lennon got the song Imagine in a dream. He woke up and it was just full on there.
Wow.
And Elias Howe, the guy who invented the sewing machine, he woke up with a full design for the sewing machine. And this is just on and on. Frankly, I would invite people in their audience to ask themselves what has been important downloads of guidance at critical times in your life, where you're either shown the next path, the next piece of knowledge, then you've shown what to say in an important situation, because that's our human interaction with the field. And it's the same language that, when we worked with shamans and spiritual teachers and so forth, they describe, finding your still point, and then going into resonance with the vibration, and then going into harmony with the field. And when you do that, the field will respond to your questions, respond to your intention in ways that you can't imagine. And that's exactly the same language that the free energy inventors were saying, well, okay, what I finally did was I created a still point. I got the right geometry, the right materials, and then I had to tune it. I had to put it into resonance with the field. And when I did, lo and behold, it gave me all the energy that I needed. Same thing with the cancer cures. It's like, okay, when I got this device into the right frequencies where it created a 0 point, it put what the inventors call the straw. The straw goes out into the quantum field, taps the center of all of these, atomic, molecular, cellular, subatomic toruses. There's a still point at the center of every single vortex throughout the universe at every scale that is not only connected, but it's actually one. It's the center, it's the consciousness that centers every single system throughout the universe. And when you access that, the inventors call that the straw. And when they put the straw out there, they get the guidance. And if they can then manifest it in a device, then the device also will act as a straw. And this one friend of mine who we feature in the film, Dr. Todd Ovakaitis, spent 20 years trying to find the right chord of frequencies that would awaken our own dormant stem cells. Turns out that, you don't need to do fetal stem cells. You don't need to take them out of somebody else's hip, even your own hip. We all have billions, trillions really, of our own essentially day-old stem cells circulating in our bloodstream all the time. Wow. And this guy finally figured out a way. He worked with lasers for years with what they call phase conjugate lasers to create the right type of field conditions. And what happens is these dormant stem cells are awakened. And that once they're awakened, they're like little ducks that follow their mother around. These dormant stem cells, what happens is you take some blood out of the body, you spin the blood and take the plasma out, and then you expose the cells to this chord of frequencies. It's literally like making music with the cells, and it's sound and light both. And when you do that, then they're awakened. You put it back into your body, and now you've got billions of day-old stem cells, what they call pluripotent, which means they're capable of anything. and so they go around, and he uses the same lasers to aim on your body. If you've got a rotator cuff problem with your shoulder, or you've got a heart condition, or you've got something wrong with your brain, he literally aims the laser. I would say it's not the kind of laser that's going to do any damage. It just sends these vibrations in a safe way into your body. And the stem cells, your own stem cells that were put back into your body, they'll seek it out like the little ducklings, and they'll find wherever that frequency is being beamed, and then they'll adhere to a joint or to an organ or whatever, and they'll immediately start healing. And they have the intelligence to realize exactly what that part of the body needs to have created, whether it's tissue or bone or whatever. And so it's literally miraculous type of stuff. But now and I think this is a lot of what happens in spontaneous remission and so forth, when people are lucky enough to get into that state of consciousness. But now there are technologies which can actually assist us in tapping that 0 point and bringing the healing from the field.
Wow. That's what I was thinking when you were describing that. By the way, I had chills most of the time you were just talking about that. You could probably do that yourself without the laser, without the whatever. But if yes. Again, if you can reach that sort of state and that stillness, I like that word for it, to draw
these
that
inventors, out. The inventors, we found another consistent thing amongst them is that they all start with the anomalies. So if there's an exception to the rule about some cancer or about AIDS or an energy device or something like that, they'll always go where the anomaly is and figure out, okay, what is that indicating that we don't understand yet? And that's how Dr. Todd got started, was he saw people in spontaneous remission, and sometimes it was from a near-death experience, sometimes it was from therapy, sometimes meditation, sometimes just they were so scared that they left their body, got some guidance, came back in, and things changed. Whatever it was that it took to get into that right phase of consciousness, I think these technologies are training wheels on our own consciousness, and 100 years from now, we'll look back at the, like the bicycle or something like that, and we'll be doing this all with our minds.
Yes, my boyfriend likes to say we'll look back at cancer therapies and just think, like, how barbaric were we? Just like we thought about, like, bloodletting and putting leeches on us and stuff. Like, this is what we were doing to people, and I genuinely hope that that's true, and I love that vision of the future because that means we made it. So that's a good thing.
Yeah.
But do you think that we in the past had these technologies and had a society that understood all of these things and that we lost that somehow, or where do you stand on that?
I do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do. I certainly didn't when I started out and started hearing about Atlantis and Mu and Lemuria and so forth. But the more I studied it, and I've read translations of the Dead Sea Scrolls and all this stuff, it's like, whoa, the evidence is so strong. And you look at, there's a lot of quacks out there pretending to channel, but there's also a lot of really good channels who you can see over the decades are just phenomenally tapped into something very real. And I spent about 2 years, many years ago, just traveling around, finding the best channels I could, asking them all the same questions, and then cross-correlating their worldview and their results.
Wow, what a
and
cool
it was
experiment.
that was absolutely stunning. That convinced me that yes, like the Oracle of Delphi, this has been around. People have been doing this throughout recorded history. And if you find the good ones, it can be never to depend on them or substitute our own discernment or common sense, but to access their information. And then just like we would, listening to a lecture or tuning into a TV channel or something like that, assess the information and see if it resonates with our own inner guidance and if it cross-references with other facts and evidence. And if it does, you can save a heck of a lot of time.
That's a really great point. What else did you learn from them? It's just such a cool experiment to do. I love it.
Well, the biggest shocker to me was that almost everyone that I visited with was sick. And almost all of them had stomach ailments. So about the third or fourth time I saw this, I said, okay, listen, I've come around to you to get a glimpse of the future for me and for the rest of humanity. And I'm seeing this tremendous possibilities. And at the same time, I'm seeing you guys are sick, sometimes to the point of being close to death. And I remember they all said the same thing, basically, once I started asking them, that the key is you have to keep even that sort of talent and skill in balance. And there's this one, you can look up this guy, Paul Solomon. He was probably the top remote medical diagnostic and healer that there's ever been probably in this country. He was like on Edgar Casey's level. And he was sick with stomach problems at the time. And I said, so tell me, how can I begin to get access to what you do without making myself sick? And he said, it's very simple. You have to really be true to your sense of balance first. He said, I've had this gift since I was 12 years old. I've had people lined up outside my house to be healed. And for a long time, I felt so guilty about not spending every waking moment healing people that I just kept doing it. And in order to be in this state, he needs to go into trance. And I said, well, tell me about that. Because I have a fair amount of expertise in the art of brainwave biofeedback. I started and ran a company for 8 years in Silicon Valley called the Mind Center, where we had done the state-of-the-art research and developed the technology. And we worked with yogis and Zen masters and psychics and so forth. So we were really mapping all of this stuff and seeing who was real and who wasn't. But I said, so how do you get into that trance? And he said, well, I sit down to meditate, and then I invite the universe to draw me into its field of healing. And he said, what happens is that there is this big vortex that comes into my energy body. Now, I hadn't told him anything about my obsession with the torus, but he's describing this toroidal field. And he says it gets stronger and stronger. And at one point, as it circulates, as it cycles through my body, then etheric body leaves my physical body through, he said, in our solar plexus, he said there's a physical diaphragm just above the solar plexus. He said there's a physical diaphragm, but there's also a psychic diaphragm. And every time that I go out of body, I have to actually pierce through that diaphragm, and it takes a toll on my body.
Oh.
And he said, I've just done it like 2/3 of my waking hours since I was 12 years old, and he was in his 70s at the time. And he said, it's caught up with me. The main thing I would tell everyone is, yes, go for these skills, but don't destroy your own being, your own body in the process.
Wow, that's like a lesson that every empath and healer and person in that sort of line of work has to learn. So that makes sense. I just am noticing that you have all these Tauruses around you, by the way, and that's really cool as well. And yeah.
Well, as I depicted in Thrive 1, I was fairly traumatized by the whole Bay of Pigs incident in 1964, and also the exercise in elementary school that I had been instructed to do of getting under my desk to protect myself from a nuclear attack. And that's when I realized, okay, the adults don't know what's going on here. So that's when I committed myself to finding out how can human beings relate to energy successfully. And I received this vision that we illustrated in Thrive 1, where I was riding on a school bus and shown this whole toroidal figure that was the solar system. And then the solar system became an atom, and then the atom became a human being. And it was very clear that they were all the same pattern at different scales. I had no idea what I was being shown, but I became really obsessed. Maybe that was the beginning of my obsession with geometry, because like the characters in Close Encounters of the Third Kind, I wasn't using mashed potatoes to build my mountain, but I was going up to the physics lab every afternoon, and I was building a sculpture out of glass blocks that would take a strong beam of light and bend it, refract it around into a giant circle, and then bring it in on itself. Cool. So that was the snake eating its tail as well. Once I got that done, because everybody was wondering what happened to Gamble, this guy's lost. But I finally got it done one night, and I turned off the light, and there was this big glowing ring of light just floating in the physics lab, and I was so happy. I realized, okay, that's it. And so I called all my friends and my teachers and everything to see it, and everybody's like, wow, that's really gorgeous, but what is it? And I said, I have no idea. That's what I'm going to figure out. And that's why the Taurus is really the at the center of Thrive 1 and Thrive 2. And then in Thrive 2, we expand beyond the Taurus as the fundamental pattern of sustainability into the field itself, which is boundless, it's alive, it's conscious, and it's all made up of these toroidal vortices at every scale.
At every scale. It's like it's hard to even visualize, especially if you're out there going, what is a Taurus? Right. But once you sit with it long enough and you start thinking about it, and like you said, you start thinking of like every single cell and every single atom. Yeah, I saw that one too.
Yeah, so for anybody who doesn't know what the Taurus is, if you're watching this, it's basically a big donut.
It's a big donut.
But it's just a vortex of energy in a sea of energy. And that's really what we are. We tend to be taught in school that we're these separate objects, but every atom, every cell, every molecule, and the energy field around ourselves and around the planet and around the solar system and the galaxy, it's all just whirlpools in a sea of energy. And so it actually scientifically shows that we are simply a part of the field, and yet we can think back over our lives, and you could look back and go, okay, every cell in my body has been replaced within the last 7 years, but Lindsay's still here. Mm-hmm. So who is Lindsay? Well, by definition, your being then is metaphysical.
Yeah.
Because it didn't go away when all your cells were changed. And so if you're a metaphysical being, well, of course, it takes something like that to organize the field into something called this beautiful human being. And it's that, as I mentioned at the beginning of Thrive 1, realizing that scientifically and matching that up with my own meditative and psychotropic experiences, it all came together in a realization that, oh, who I am by definition doesn't die. So why go around being afraid of death? And it, that's enabled me to do all sorts of stuff in my life that I might have been afraid to do if I was obsessed with my reputation or attached to my physical body.
Well, and how key is that? It's such a powerful, if there was like nothing else that somebody was going to do with their life, I would hope that they would do that and realize the truth of who they are, because this takes away every single tool that the elite and the power mongers have against us. If you are not afraid, because and I always like to say, like, you're still afraid, like if a lion jumped into your room right now, you would scramble away in fear perhaps, or whatever. I'm not saying that we can completely abolish that, but getting rid of the fear of death itself is the best tool that you can have. They don't have anything.
Fear is a critical human characteristic, but like you say, the key is to master fear, to become a really good friend with fear, because fear is there to shoot adrenaline to your extremities and get you to either fight or flee in a critical situation. So our challenge is to recognize when we start feeling afraid, recognize, oh, okay, I'm perceiving some sort of threat, and then take the time to go, okay, what's the threat? Is somebody attacking me physically? Am I starving? Is someone trying to damage my career, my reputation, whatever? And thank your organism for the alert. Okay, I got it. And then commit yourself to a path of managing that stressor, of taking care of the situation. Because in the Mind Center that I mentioned before, we were teaching stress reduction to Silicon Valley executives and spiritual seekers and so forth. And the key to reducing stress, because everybody has stressors in their life. I truly think it's part of being an organism. Every plant, every animal is subject to stress. The key is to keep it in balance so that it doesn't become debilitating. And so when you get the message, then if you make a plan of action and then commit to that action, if you've got a relationship which really feels like it's out, the stress will just continue, and it'll show up in your dreams and get in the way of your work and all that stuff, until you actually sit down and take responsibility for it. You make a plan of action. Okay, I need to sit down with that person and apologize, or ask them about this, tell them about that. And when you make a commitment to a common sense plan of action, the magic is that's when the stress disappears. Because your organism knows, okay, they got the alert, they're doing something about it. Now, if you don't follow through, then the stress is going to come back again, just like recurrent dreams do, until you actually face your fear, integrate your next level of awareness and action, and then move on.
What a beautiful thing, just to recognize that your organism is working properly, and that that these things are a blessing, and that you shouldn't necessarily look at them as this problem you need to get rid of, but like, fear exists for a reason. What is the problem that needs to be addressed? Or like, I have people who are like, oh, I have so much anxiety, I have to take this medication because I just have so much anxiety. It's like, well, cool, do whatever you need, but you have anxiety for a reason. There's a reason your body is being anxious, feeling anxious, and so maybe you can try to figure out why that is and solve the problem instead of masking it.
I mentioned something in Thrive 2 that I call the science of love, because everybody wants to be feeling love.
Yeah.
And when you feel it, it's so great. You realize why everybody wants to feel it. But I think that the key is not finding your soulmate and, okay, that's what's going to bring love into my life. I believe that love is actually the experience of harmonic resonance with the field itself. And in order to be in that state, I think there's a science to it. And the science that my lifetime has revealed to me is that you need to get mastery, sufficient not like everything's perfect, but it's like most people have mastered riding a two-wheel bike. It's that kind of mastery. You need to master your physical body in such a way that you're allowing yourself to breathe, and you're allowing your circulation to flow and so forth. And when you can relax into that, then what happens is it releases your emotions. Then you need to learn to master your emotions. Yeah. And it doesn't mean, oh, keep a stiff upper lip and don't ever let them see you cry. No, it means find the right situations and let yourself be angry without taking it out on someone. Let yourself feel the anger. Underneath that is the sadness. Underneath that is the fear. Let yourself feel all of that. It will take you back to center and it will clear your emotional body. So your motive force can then inspire your life again. If you don't do that, if you shut that all down, your emotional body will literally disconnect from your physical body, and that's depression. And it can kill you. It can kill you in 6 months to a year. The way to access it again is not taking a drug. It's not just, saying nice things to make yourself happy or something like that. You actually have to get in touch with the anger and release it. You have to get in touch with the sadness and do the crying, release it. Get in touch with the fear and release it. And that'll take you right back down to the center. And then there will be a thought. And you have to watch really carefully. This is a high level skill. There will be a thought that is the source of your anxiety. Mm-hmm. And it'll be an untrue thought, like, I'm just not worthy. Mm-hmm. I'm not lovable. My life will always be a disaster. Some negative affirmation like that is going on. And if you cleared your emotional body such that you can see the thought, then you can replace that thought with, okay, I am worthy of love. And I'm doing my best to learn every day how to fulfill my potential. Whatever it is that is true, that works for you. And that opens up the next level of the science of love. There's the physical, the emotional, and then that's the mental. The mental is not just, learning important information. That's a key part of it. But it's learning to clear the mind. That's where meditation is so critical. When you can actually release the boundaries of your mind and be nurtured by the field. That's the role of sleep. It's the role of dreaming. It's the role of meditation, is to access the healing and the guidance of the field, and then to be able to focus your mind when you have a task to do. And that's the mental realm. And then when you've got those realms together, what happens is you don't need to go looking for your spirit. You don't need to make up your spirituality. What happens when you clear the resistance, just like in an electrical circuit, the energy will come through. Meditation teachers say that the beings on higher levels, they watch your light, and as they see more light, they send more light. And that's just the way it works. When you clear your system, more energy comes through, and it takes you to the next level of consciousness. So that's the spiritual level. And then the final level for me is, once you are that kind of centered, powerful, radiant being, then the key is, how do I keep that when I'm relating to my spouse or my kids or my work partners, my family, my friends, and so forth. And that's another whole science that I spent 15 years studying and teaching. I was a communication and conflict resolution facilitator in Silicon Valley. And I worked with law firms and, Fortune 500 companies and startups and elementary schools and sports teams and so forth. And it was just really exciting work first of all, I learned from a lot of great teachers. And it's basically doing Aikido with being able to recognize and share your emotions and your thought, and to be able to really listen. That's the most advanced skill of all, is really listening to another person so that you're creating their communications. Instead of just working up your response, you're actually fully letting in their experience, letting yourself experience what they experience. And when you do, they'll know it instantaneously. And it just feels good. They'll stop complaining. They'll stop attacking, whatever it is, when they feel recreated. And then they do the same thing for you. And that's what creates a thriving relationship. And I am so blessed to have found someone like Kimberly, who is dedicated to the science of love in the same way. And she's I've been highly trained, and she was more of a natural. She's really good at bringing up, if she feels anything in the way of the relationship, she's going to bring it up. And now she's learned a lot of the skills that that I had been taught. And now we can support each other. And the most important thing is the quality of the relationship. And we don't sacrifice that to any deadlines, any other stressors, whatever it is, because that's really the source of our well-being, being well in ourselves and with each other. That's what allows us to do everything else.
What a beautiful roadmap to wellness that you've just laid out for everybody listening. That's so awesome. I really love that you do it in that order too, the physical to the emotional to the mental to the spiritual, because it's not necessarily the order that I think a lot of people would like jump to, you know, but it really makes so much sense, and it definitely relates. I can relate to it in my own work as well. So I love that. And you know, when you're describing the person that you're working with in this emotional way and you really listen to them, I was just thinking of that. It's the same concept of you're harmonizing with them. You know, you're like tuning to them. And once you get tuned, like you're saying, they know. Well, they know because they're also now harmonized with you. And, you know, and I love that
Yeah, and I think, by the way, that's one of the reasons for the success of your show is that, you know, I've watched a lot of your previous shows. And one of the things that I was just delighted by is that you're obviously a really good thinker, but you're also a really good listener. So I watch your guests feel like they're being recreated, and now I'm getting to experience it myself. So thank you.
That's so awesome. I really, you know, people are like, oh, you're a natural. You have this like script or you have the questions. And I'm like, I have like all these questions written down and I almost never even look at them because I just, once you start telling me things, I'm like, oh my God, what about this? And
yeah, and that's the real conversation, because it's more than my thoughts and your thoughts. We're both in this field, and I'm taking from the field. I'm being guided by the field all the time, and it comes out as words, and so are you. And when you say something, it changes my field, and vice versa. That's the joy of interrelating.
It's so beautiful. What an honor. Now I'm like stunned into silence because that was a really nice compliment. Well, I know we face so many problems, and, you know, you list so many of them in Thrive 2, and we've got the, you know, Starlink up in the sky with this 5G radiation that's going to maybe be beamed down or is already being beamed down. I'm not really sure where that's at. And we have all these things being suppressed, and we have this dark winter that they're planning, and we have the coronavirus, you know, and we have the vaccine that they want to roll out, and we've got, you know, natural health has been being suppressed, and, you know, now the cyber terrorism thing that's coming up. But you have, like I said, solutions to all of this. You know, and we just talked about many of them because I really do think it starts in that personal level of, you know, you get quiet with your own physical body, breathe deeply, you know, and then, you know, let the emotions out, and that really does transform yourself, and it really does transform the world. But we also have this sort of mass level of being, and you lay out all sorts of solutions. And I love so much that Larkin Rose is in Thrive 2, and that you talk about, you know, the non-aggression principle, and that you talk about just voluntarism and these things that I think, again, a lot of people never get to that point where we're dealing with, like, what do we actually do then? How do we actually do society? Like, you know, if we get past all this, and I think we will, and we can thrive, then what is it gonna look like? So it's just such a beautiful thing that you present all of this together.
And Larkin and Amanda are coming on, I have a show on 3 Saturdays a month that we call the Freedom Portal. And the first format is that they're called 7 Levels Deep. There's light at the end of the rabbit hole. And I take a different topic each month. We did the US election. This last month was COVID. And this upcoming one is how to have successful conversations over the holidays and beyond. Because every single person that I know, that I talk to anywhere in the world, is being challenged now by how do we talk about politics? How do we talk about conspiracy? How do we even talk about science and health without people getting in disrespectful arguments and just losing our relationships over them? So, you know, as I'm sure you have, Kimberly and I have had a lot of experience with that. We're still learning on a daily basis, but we're dedicating December to that topic. So she and I are going to be doing a show on it a week from this Saturday. And then the following Saturday, just before Christmas, Larkin and Amanda are going to come on for a couple hours because they're the best that I know at this. They do this workshop called Candles in the Dark that is absolutely brilliant, right? You know, Larkin is a He's a brilliant philosopher, but he's a feisty guy. You know, he's nobody's going to mess with Larkin and just get away scot-free. But over the years, he's learned to temper his feistiness and channel it into brilliant verbal aikido. And he teaches people all over the country to do this in such a way that they end up having really intimate conversations about politics and freedom and the principle of non-aggression and so forth with people who either were very resistant or knew nothing about it. And he's actually able to do it in such a way that usually no resistance comes up at all. And boy, I think that's the fundamental skill that we need right now, is learning how to have those conversations. And when we can have those conversations, then the critical content can come through. And I think the most critical content is the non-aggression principle. Yeah. And for anybody, I imagine your audience is very familiar with that. Yeah. But for any who aren't, or if this gets shared more widely, it's fundamentally that no one is allowed to initiate force or fraud against anyone else except in true self-defense. In other words, if you can protect yourself, but you can't start a fight. You can't cheat someone. And it sounds like the most obvious thing in the world. It's like, of course, oh yeah, that's the golden rule. I know all about that. And everybody will say that almost, but then they'll turn right around and vote for their next political candidate who is going to have the authority to take your money, send your kids to war, pad the coffers of their cronies, and on and on. Yeah. So it's no wonder that every government throughout the world is and has been corrupt, because the notion of government itself, and some people have rights that other people don't have, that's corrupt at its core. And this is the most obvious point, and yet the most challenging point for us in the Thrive movement to get across to people. People are more comfortable with banking schemes and agricultural conspiracies and extraterrestrials and so forth than they are with actually following through on the thought that nobody should have authority over anyone else, and that we should each be accountable for 100% of our behavior. But I think what society has been missing most fundamentally, and I think the key to humanity thriving rather than destroying ourselves, is having a universal morality. And so for most of history, there was no morality. It's just whoever had the biggest club. And then the church came in and gave some sense of morality, but of course that was responsible for millions of deaths as everybody was fighting over their interpretation of what God said morality was. So then the state comes in to make it all objective, and now there's hundreds of thousands of laws in every country where a few people have decided on what everybody else should and shouldn't be able to do, and the state took over from the church as the biggest source of mass murder in history. So clearly that's not the best source for a universal morality. I mean, even if it's a legitimate majority vote, it's still mob rule. So I think what we've been missing is the one thing that Kimberly and I, in traveling around the world, have found that every single human being we've ever met agrees to. It's tough to get your family to decide on a restaurant to go out to dinner. Getting all of humanity to agree to one important thing, that seems like a virtual impossibility. Yeah. But everybody naturally agrees that they don't want to be violated against their will. So bingo, just like there the torus, even though nobody knew what a torus was until recently, and the torus is the fundamental blueprint for sustainable systems at every scale, the non-aggression principle, I believe, is the compass. It's the true north for a universal morality. And I mean universal. It's not just for human beings. When extraterrestrials land and make themselves apparent and impress us with all their advanced technology and telepathic skills, that'd be great. Hopefully we can learn a lot from each other, but we need to not subjugate ourselves to them because they're more evolved than we are in some ways or something like that. Yeah. It's critical that non-aggression principle is throughout the cosmos.
It's fascinating that you also describe the non-aggression principle in relation to the the toroid of the unified field around us as well, right? Like it
Yeah,
also
exactly.
doesn't want to be ingressed upon.
Well, that's where it was exciting for Kimberly and me, and one of the reasons why we decided to make Thrive 2, because we never thought we would make another feature film. It was like, whoa, we're too old for this. But the reason we decided to do it was the solutions we were seeing were so absolutely thrilling. While most of humanity was feeling hopeless and helpless and confused,
Yeah.
we were seeing, oh my God, there are already existing solutions to every single problem, including how for human beings to self-organize nonviolently. And so that's when we realized that, okay, the scientific principles that we were seeing with energy and with health and with consciousness, they also apply, in a sense, transpolitically to, we can take that science of the torus and the field into human relationships, because the mistake so far has been that we've all been brainwashed into thinking that the group was the fundamental unit. So you have to give up your individuality, your sovereign right to freedom, in order to benefit the group. Well, that's been benefiting essentially pretty much only the oligarchs for centuries. And they know that. The king knew that he didn't really have a divine right to rule. But if he could fool everybody, same thing with the dictators, okay, if his army's strong enough, he gets to rule. Now people are beginning to see through democracy, republics, and all that stuff. And of course, the natural place where all of this leads is toward individual sovereignty. And when you look into the bloodstream, the way Dr. Robert Young in Thrive 2 has been doing for 35 years, and curing hundreds of people of cancer, the key is that every single blood cell needs to be whole. It's a torus. It needs to be whole, and it needs to be independent of the other cells. If they get crushed together by toxicity, by stress, by overacidity, whatever it is, if they get crushed together, then they're not happy. They start to lose their strength. Then the circulation can't happen because they're plugging the arteries. And basically what it leads to is sickness and or death. So that's a biological lesson for the human species of, okay, the fundamental unit applying this holistic science is the actual sovereign individual being. And if we each need to honor everyone else's space so that we can't do anything to their body. I mean, it's obvious in the case of rape. It's just not okay.
Yeah.
And same thing with theft. It's just not okay to take someone else's property, even if you call it taxation. To assault someone is obviously not okay. So these are just violations of the wholeness of each person's sovereignty or the integrity of their being. So it really is as simple as, okay, that's our guideline. Now we need to do that. We need to get rid of politics, get rid of authority itself, and then base all our systems, our conflict resolution, our insurance, our security, our media, our education, base it all on voluntary exchange and the sovereign rights of individual beings. So it's the simplest thing possible.
Yes.
And yet it's eluded us. The mystics have known it, but it's eluded the masses throughout human history. And now we're at the moment where if we don't learn this, I think we're gone. Right now, very soon, an individual will be able to buy a dirty bomb or make one on the internet and then take out a city because they're pissed off at how they're being treated. And much less what countries can do to each other or the Illuminati can do to the masses with weapons of mass destruction. So we're actually at that moment in history when we have to learn it for the first time. We've been getting away with wars and deceit and authoritarian, tyranny forever. Now's the moment when we actually have to figure this out. And the COVID thing is bringing it literally into everybody's home.
Yeah.
The mass illusion that, oh my gosh, the state is going to save us. Well, not a lot of evidence going on of that. So it's actually the moment when I think that the masses can wake up to the illusion of the state, when we watch them censoring true medical information, when we watch them censoring honest currencies and all of this stuff, and then shutting everybody down in their house for no good reason, making people wear masks when they're proven ineffective. They have to fudge all of these cases based on false testing, the PCR test for a virus which has never been proven to exist. I mean, the whole thing is such a house of cards. I mean, I've literally just finished a paper that summarizes 11 months of research on this that should be coming out next week. And what I tried to do is just put all of those many confusing pieces together into a scenario where if you look through the lens of the global domination agenda, it's like, oh, okay, it all makes sense. The Great Reset, they've actually opened the playbook for us, and we're here now. So we have our choice: surrender ourselves to a bunch of psychopaths or actually stand up for ourselves and claim the human being's right to thrive. And I think within a few years, we will be full on in that direction. I'm actually, there's no way we can know. I don't like to predict because this is not predestined. It's actually up to what each one of us does. Yeah. But given my faith in what I see going on around the world and my faith in the life force and humanity itself, I actually think we're at that moment, that tipping point toward true freedom that I hoped to see during my lifetime. And now I'm actually really confident that I will.
Yeah, I love that. You have the same outlook as me. The future can't actually be known, but we can bet on if every single person listening takes all of this to heart, literally, yes, and starts exercising it, and starts practicing this, then that transforms the whole world. And that's exactly what it takes. Like you said, just as important as the individual is to be sovereign, it's as important for the individual to take responsibility for themselves and their part in this, like all the blood cells have to be separate and have their space, but they all have to exist in a healthy way,
right.
It's all of us. And
I want to tell your folks also that we've got a very exciting tool, which we're going to be launching after the first of the year. They called the Thrive On Solutions Hub, because when we take people down the rabbit hole, it's a 7-stage map through the rabbit hole. The first is something's going on in the world. Second stage is the controllers are spinning it to get us to believe something. Third stage, you follow the money to find out who's benefiting from this destruction, and that leads you to the global domination agenda every single time. And then once you get there, then you can create solutions which are actually addressing the problem, solutions which are restoring the wholeness of natural systems. And then the next step is to find your own individual purpose and path. Choose the sector that you want to work on, the issue that most draws you, the level of engagement that is most natural for you. And then once you know that about yourself, then you're a very powerful being in the world. And then the next step is to, if you're drawn to, collaborate with other people. And we developed before we even launched Thrive One, we developed a solutions model that we used in 2007 to stop a huge toxic spray incident where George Bush Jr. had secretly appropriated $1 billion from Homeland Security, and he was going to spray all of Northern California for up to 9 months a year for at least 10 years renewable with toxins. They wouldn't even tell us what it was till we finally, threatened them with lawsuits in such a way that they finally revealed it. And sure enough, it had sterilants, it had endocrine disruptors, it had carcinogens and mutagens. It was all the stuff that I was afraid was in there, that they were dropping on 11 million people. It was all in there. And so that was the first time we used this sector model and got people together from Monterey all the way to Sonoma. We started forming groups where people would create whole systems in their region, where the lawyers would be on a justice team and the scientists on a science team. People who wanted to follow the money were on the economics team. We had a media team, a spirituality team, an arts team, a media. And so we had all the different skills, but now we had them organized, working on one issue. And the bottom line is we stopped a presidential edict and $1 billion project in 6 months with about $50,000. Because all of a sudden we were filing lawsuits. We got to the bottom of the science and could reveal the truth about what was really going on. the mothers organized. We basically took over the Golden Gate Bridge one day, and that got a lot of press. And we found the seed truth and we exposed it, and they had to go away. And now that's what's happening in groups all over the world. And as Kimberly and I traveled around, everywhere we went with a screening or workshop, people would come up to us and say, just want you to know that we've got a solutions group in Boise or Denver or in Paris or in Buenos Aires, whatever it is. We already have a solutions group inspired by Thrive, and here are the issues that we're taking on. And we were so moved by that, that we thought, okay, well, how can we help them? And we realized that all of the groups were going through the same cycle of inventing the wheel. So they were all having to figure out petitions and lawsuits and doing the research and how do we get funded and all that stuff. So we created a solutions hub on our website where people could list their group, and then other individuals could find them either locally or virtually, by issue or by region. And then they could share best practices. So they could put up their petitions and lawsuits. So they were no longer recreating the wheel, they were sharing information. And it saves so much time. There's now over 1,100 groups in more than 90 countries around the world.
Oh my God.
So we're redoing that software and bringing it forward so that it's mobile friendly. We're putting it in 40 languages. And this allows people to coordinate their activity locally or globally. And we'll be sending out lots of messages to our network when this is ready after the first of the year, because this will accelerate the activity. Of course, the most threatening thing right now is COVID, and it's got everybody really motivated. But the virus, or at least the contagion, so-called, people will discover that's not the problem. It's what's using that. It's what's behind that. That's the problem that's doing the GMOs and the glyphosate and the chemtrails and the banking scams and the Federal Reserve. All this other stuff comes from there. And so we can go after all the different aspects, but we can also go after the source of it. So that'll be decentralized. People won't be able to shut it down because it'll be all over the world. So we're really excited about just helping people synergize their efforts, and that'll be coming soon.
What a beautiful model to have, especially the decentralization. You're like putting into practice exactly all of the things that, you would, because you're you. That's awesome.
Well, and the cool thing is it's based on the torus and the field. All the communication systems, they're leaderless systems, but they're very specifically kind of protocoled in such a way that the communications match the kind of internal spiral of the torus. And then the structure itself is there's 12 sectors, media, spirituality, economics, that kind of thing, surrounding one, which is worldview, which is consciousness itself, because whatever sector we're involved in, we see it through our worldview. So about 10 different organizations, including Thrive, developed this model a decade ago. And the fact that it matches what the universe does, the vector equilibrium is the structure, and I don't have one of those in here right now, but then the torus is the flow, and because it matches the natural principles of the field, it just energizes everyone and coordinates it. So when we defeated that dangerous initiative with this toxic spray that they were doing covertly, we submitted some Freedom of Information requests, and something that got revealed, we got a bunch of government emails, and one of them was our trophy for this whole thing, was this email that said, after we beat them, it said, we expected some resistance from Santa Cruz, but we had no idea it would be so well organized. So that's what we're trying to share with the world.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, you have me excited to go check that out and connect with it, because that's exactly, it just is a beautiful thing. And I also, as we're maybe starting to close down or head towards the end of the show, I want to just share some of my favorite quotes from the movie, because what I really, really loved, it actually gave me chills when I heard it, is Kimberly looked at the camera and she said, all life matters. And I was like, ooh. Because we're like, oh, do Black Lives Matter? Do all lives matter? Like, well, all life matters, period.
Yes, exactly.
It's so beautiful.
Yeah, and it's interesting you say that because we really had to decide, okay, there's certain elements that are going to try to give us flack for that. First of all, nobody has.
Nice.
And secondly, just like you pointed out, rather than also white lives matter or brown lives matter, whatever, no, go right to the heart of the matter, which is all life matters.
Life matters. I love it. I love it because it honors everything, and I love that you point out that the unified field is on our side. You know, it's like if you still haven't been inspired to feel hopeful and to maybe act, you know, within yourself and without yourself, by what we've been talking about today, then you can think about that. They don't have the unified field on their side. I think they think that they've like hacked some things and whatever. I don't think they get it.
Yeah.
And I think mostly they've been able to be so successful due to people's, you know, fear and desire to not look into the darkness like we were talking about. But when you actually get down to it, I think that field is on our side because it is love and loving. And we're going to harmonize with that. So I love that.
Yeah, exactly.
Quote too.
That's one of the main things that gives me confidence because, I mean, I practiced it for years with Aikido, that if you're centered, if your posture is aligned and you're not resisting, you're extending energy out, but you're flowing with energy rather than going up against it, then basically the energy that you can channel is boundless. And of course, it's the same with a free energy device. And now as we're coming into the non-aggression principle as the basis of a universal morality, that's a lot of what gives me confidence, is that as you align with the field, the energy is boundless and it realizes the connection that is already true amongst all of us.
Yeah, very well said. And I also love that you point out that we have real life superpowers. Because that's a thing that I like to talk about on the show. Like, we have a superpower of empathy, and we have a superpower of gratitude, and we have all of these superpowers, and it's not just like a trite thing that I'm saying to, like, you know, be cute or whatever. It's like that actually unleashes potential and transforms people's lives, and I love that you give that out too. As much as we can just empower people, you know, and remind them that, like, you already are enough and more than enough to do all of these things and to solve all of these problems. I love that.
Well, we especially wanted to get that out in the era of Marvel comics and movies, where basically everybody's cheering for some mutant to come in and fix it for us.
Some robot.
The unspoken is assumption is that we can't fix it ourselves. And you watch most of TV now, and particularly now, men and especially white men are just depicted as so stupid and incompetent.
Yeah.
And it's all, you know, it's like little girls with energies streaming out of their hand or something like that. That's what's going to rescue the universe. And I love that you notice that we already have exactly the powers that we need. We just have certain misunderstandings and misinformation. And as we clear that up and reclaim our power, we literally, as we say in our Thrive theme song, we already have what it takes to thrive.
Yeah. And that leads us right into my last and favoriteest quote, which is, "We were born to do this. We were born to thrive."
Yeah. Well, that's it, the essence of it for me, and that's why it's my last line in the film. When I teach workshops, oftentimes I'll take people through a fantasy, and I'll have them, particularly if they're feeling kind of hopeless, and, you know, what could one person do? And, you know, I failed at these other things or whatever. And I tell them, listen, you're not going to get away with any of that with me. I know who you are. And I'll tell you how I know who you are. Imagine yourself standing on a beach and you're about to start a swimming race. And you look there's contestants to the right of you and there's contestants to the left of you. Only one person is going to win this race, and there's approximately 60 million competitors. That's who you were as a sperm. And guess who won that damn race? That's a lot of intention. That's what got every single one of us here. And then we're conditioned to forget that. But as you remember that, it's like Aikido, that's your still point. And then as you start to express that energy, you're tapping into the boundless field. And we're truly capable of virtually anything we can imagine, especially as we collaborate.
Yes. So let ourselves imagine the best thing possible and work towards that. And I'll want to remind everyone again that if you want to thrive with other Rogue Warriors, you can come to the 3 Days of Brightness retreat this December 21st through 23rd. Go check it out on the rogueways.org shop and get your spot. I can't wait to thrive with you. And Foster Gamble, it's such an honor to talk with you. Where else can people go? I know you said you had the Thrive Hub, and can they literally just search for the Thrive Hub?
Yeah, everything now is at thriveon.com.
Okay.
You'll find a lot of information, a lot of articles, blogs, and so forth, and a lot of videos. And you'll also find the beginnings of the Solution Hub there, so you can start getting familiar with it, and then the full-blown thing will come on after the first of the year. And you'll find there what we call the Freedom Portal, and that's where people can subscribe for $10 a month and actually become a part of this conversation that I was describing before. And that's a very serious group of people that you can interact as much as you want or don't want, but there's no trolling going on in there. It's a bunch of people who have the capacity for challenging information and for actually getting active to create the solution. So that's the Freedom Portal with Foster Gamble, and I would welcome you in.
Awesome. And I love that. And I know before people complain about it, that is why you have no trolls, is because you have to pay a monthly fee, which is a very small fee. $10 is
right.
Not very much. And I've found the same in creating my own groups. If you have even just a tiny little barrier to entry, then the people who come actually want to be there, and that's worth so much. That's worth $10 a month.
Yes, exactly, because we need to be having the meaningful conversations, not the useless
distraction,
coordinated conflict stuff.
Yeah. Oh, how cool. And I really want to get then what your final words of wisdom are to people that you want to leave people on as we shut down.
Well, first of all, just thank you for the honor to interact with the souls who are following your show, because I have tremendous respect for what you're doing and the consciousness and the courage with which you're doing it. And I guess my final message would be to reiterate something that I said earlier, which is I do believe from a lifetime of very serious research that we already have what it takes to thrive. And now it's a matter for each of us to find our purpose. If you don't already know it, sit down and figure out, just look inside yourself. You're the only one who will truly know your purpose. And then on our website, we'll lead you through the path of process, which will guide you taking your purpose into real life action, because the future of a thriving world is in our DNA. It's what we're here for. It's what evolution is heading toward. And at the same time, the beauty and the challenge of human life is it's also up to us to play our part, or the whole experiment on planet Earth could be set back 60 million years.
Absolutely. It's so much pressure, and at the same time, like you said, we already have everything it takes.
Yeah, we got this.
Yeah, we got this. I love it so much. Fellow travelers of the path, it is a beautiful thing. This has been your analog, electric, concentric dose of wisdom according to the awesome Master Foster Gamble. Thank you so much for being here with us tonight.
My pleasure. Thanks a lot. See y'all.
Bye-bye. Well, everybody, happiness is truly an inside job. And so is independence, and so is sovereignty, and so is healthy interdependence, and so is living in balance, and so is creating a beautiful external world. Thriving is an inside job. And as always, the masters have been telling us all along what the best course is to save the entire world, and it is to save the entirety of ourselves. Are you ready? Now is the time to go as deep as you can and transform as much as you can. The world will celebrate your inevitable success. So go reach in and reach down and reach up and pull it all together at your core right here, right now. And until you do, travel well, aim for balance, and always look inside first. Mwah.
Yeah, come on, Rat Kings, baby. It's the rap. Yeah, check it. Gray bearded pirate, my motherfucker unknown. Yeah, come on. In the place with my fist up, meaning I resist the bullshit that they feed us and lead us. This is just a part of the process, man. Just watch this, cause this shit's about to get crazy like a mosh pit. We lost it, toss it, let's start it again. Cause now with technology, with smarter men and women, this is the beginning, not the end. And this is the message of hope that I send. Look on your TV, it's a culture of death. They'll keep on lying to the very last breath. We keep on striving and spreading the truth. It's hard to survive in this world for the youth. The door is closed, the old world is dead. Let's have an age of understanding instead. I'll include you and you include me. Let's see what we can build with some positivity. Let's go, you're moving too slow. Let me see your hands if you know what I know. Come on.
Rap like mummy, ain't no dummy in my rhyming. Started flowing freestyle and now they rhyming loud silence. On with the violence, bodies piling with the gray bearded pirate. On your TV in 4K 3D virtual reality. Casualty of urban warfare. I know but I'm not scared, just prepared and aware. Shining my light through the tunnel of hope into the rope, but I'ma give it one more pull till the family is full. Take the bull by the horns and lead it to the slaughter. That would be harder and you would be softer. Sometimes I'm a monster and you forever imposter with your champagne and lobster. This royalty, the way it was supposed to be. Hopefully the new door opens and the old one closes with way more focus and growth to mold us. And the truth that they should have told us.
Glued to them screens, it's a plot to drop the IQ. Fighting amongst each other over rulers that don't like you. Prefer us trapped in melancholy with the wood ones of holly. Suggestions that a flicker rates to camouflage the folly. Attempted mental robbery, executed sloppily. The pompers see this mockery and walk the talk with me. Put the hands up to touch the Akasha, cause you know deep down there's something bigger than your wallet. Everyone got a gift, everyone got a light. They want you to forget that ish, cause they can't dim the bright. The positive vibration takes you past the sign shackles, from the sewers and the alleys in the moving castles. Who these assholes really serving with an exposed Achilles surgeon around the corner lurking to prove ascension trumps perversion. Learn them to catch fish and unplug the signal. Show them the simpletons now build the fucking temples.